Alright, so we're not actually going to tie a fly this time. What I've been asked to do is to explain how to double a hackle. Now, doubling a hackle means that you're putting all the fibres of one side of the hackle onto the other. So as you can see, most hackles will have a shape to them. I suppose whenever I was being taught how to tie flies, we called it a dry fly and a wet fly shape. So as you can see, there's a convex side to it. That tends to be the shiny side of your feather, and then the concave side, that tends to be the duller side. So when we're doubling, generally we're tying some sort of a wet fly or a salmon fly. So what we want to do, as a right-handed tyer, I'm going to be wrapping my feather this way. So what I want to do is have all the fibres from this side, on the good side, over to this side. Now, I can do this with one hand holding it. That takes a certain degree of practice and dexterity to do that. I suppose my job helps me along the lines of that. But if you take your feather and strip off the portion that you're actually wanting to wind on, so if you grab your feather by the tip, and as you can see here, the good side, or the convex side, is downwards. I then fold my hackle, having the tip like this, and folding it and catching it with my next two fingers, and that allows me to put a bend into the ratchet or stem. So now I'm using my finger and I'm poking the fibres over and around onto this side of the ratchet, and once I get them over there, and then allow that to slide between my thumb and forefinger as I stroke them all back, I will end up with all my fibres on one side. So I poke them with this finger, that folds it up, pull that against your finger, it forces them onto one side, and by pulling them against the apex of the curve, that allows me to stroke them all onto one side, and I'll end up with a doubled hackle. Okay, so as you can see, that all is on one, and as I wrap that then as a right-handed tyer, it'll create a nice neat hackle. Shouldn't be any fibres going astray because they're all on one side, whereas if you're just wrapping a straight hackle, some of them might go left, some of them might go right of the stem, and you'll end up with a little bit more uncontrolled. Now, as I said, that's not always necessarily easy to do, to catch like that, so there's a variety of other methods that you can do. So we'll take another feather, we'll strip off the bit that we want to use. Now in this case, I'm going to take my hackle pliers and I'm going to grab the base of the stem, and then I can put that between my finger and these two fingers. It might be easier for you to hold it that way. So, see? And again, same idea. Fold it onto one side. This type of hackle plier you could possibly also put onto a finger and do it that way, holding the feather, but basically you have to be able to hold the feather at 2 points and create a curve into the stem that you can pull against and get all your fibres going on one side. Now this can also be done in a vise. Again, strip it off. Now the only problem here is that the vise may damage and break the tip a lot more easily. I'll try it and see does it work. Usually have to tighten the vise well up. So holding it by the tip, you can then stroke the fibres between thumb and forefinger. As you can see, always pull against the apex of your curve, and by changing the position of this hand, you change where that curvature is and you work along it as you go. Again, you end up with a doubled hackle. It's probably also possible to do that by tying the feather in to the vise by its base. But then you're doubling it from the other end. It's a little bit more awkward to me. I'm just used to doing it one particular way. But again, you'll get a certain control to it. And any fibres that do refuse to play ball, just nick them off. So, when you're doubling a hackle, say you wanted to double a hackle to tie a competition fly, you want the last wrap to be very controlled. So if I strip this off, now this works especially well when you're doing something with any sort of duck flank, because they tend to be straighter at the tips of the feathers and very curved as you get towards the base of them. What I would do there is to strip one side, but only for the last part. So the last couple of wraps, whenever you double it, are actually only one-sided. So therefore, when you wrap this portion on, the last couple of wraps will all have the same curve that you want, and they will control the fibres that are underneath them. So I would do that. And double that, which gives me a partly doubled. So, the traditional method that you'd see in some of the books for doubling a hackle involved forcing it over your finger, like that. As you see, as you do that, the fibres tend to come up, and then people would have started stroking in one direction with their thumb against the finger, and that too will also create a doubled hackle. But then I find with that you need to stroke it anyway to neaten it up. And I suppose now we'll show you how a double hackle looks when you wind it on. So this is just a hook for the purpose of, we're not actually going to tie a fly, we're just going to wrap up a hackle. So you see here we have one of the hackles that we doubled earlier. So what I would do with this is just nip out the tip and then tie in across the last tiny little bit of hackle stem, double it back, and a couple of wraps across itself. Now, as you can see, all the fibres are on one side, so as we wrap, I just use my finger to control the shape of the stalk, because stalks are not round, they will be flattened one way or another. So sometimes they'll want to sit straight out, and sometimes they'll want to fold over. So, but by rotating your stalk as you wrap it, you can control the direction that the fibres lay in on when you've wrapped your hackle, so you can get them to lay a lot flatter if you want, or twist the stalk out and they'll stick out far more. See? I'll go back to the portion we had there. So once that hackle is wrapped onto the portion I want, I would actually strip off a little bit of the remaining and tie it across bare stalk if you can. Fold it back on itself, nip that off, and then use my thumb and forefinger to shape that into place. So take that off, and we'll try and do a technique of doubling a hackle as you wind it. So just wrap thread on. You can imagine there's a fly behind that. So we take a hackle here, strip off from the base the bits that we don't want. Now in this case what I'd do, hold your tackle by the tip and just slide your fingers down to splay the fibres out perpendicular to the feather stalk, and nip out the very tip. Pull a couple of fibres forward and that'll just get you a mil or so of hackle stalk to tie in on. Cross it and fold over it a couple of times just to tie it in. Now some people can do this with scissors. That's not simple. So what I do is put on the hackle pliers and then take your finger and throw it across the front of the hackle here, and grab then with your thumb and forefinger, and as you wrap just pull the fibres through your finger and thumb, and that, as you might be able to see, is stroking them into the same doubled position as we go. So grab the hackle, slide through, around, slide it through, around, and now the whole hackle is doubled. Wrap it on. Pull it all back. Finish it off. So obviously this bears no relation to any fly, but hopefully that will give you a little bit of help with doubling hackles. And I'll just do my own technique one more time just to show you. So I grab my hackle, turn it so that the bad or the good face is away from me, and grab that between finger and thumb. Then next two fingers, fold the hackle over to it, put a bend into it, poke in the fibres, so I'm just putting my finger in through the loop and press it against the hackle stalk, and then allow that will curve the stuff from this side around, and then I just stroke that between finger and thumb on this side, pulling against the bend. And again, there you have a doubled hackle.